Hey guys, I am so excited. It is 1 minute before 6 o'clock, and I get the opportunity to go live with Julius Boatwright of Still Smiling out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We have a wonderful relationship with Still Smiling. We've been able to work with them for a while now. Onyx opened up its office in Pittsburgh in August because our assistant clinical director decided to move there. She was there to pursue her doctorate degree at Duquesne University. Subsequently, we said, hey, the folks in Pittsburgh might benefit from having Onyx there. We definitely benefit from being there as well and being able to build up within that community. We've been established here in DC for a number of years, about 7 years now, and we've had the opportunity to expand to Maryland as well. I see a couple of my counselors have logged on tonight, so shout out to Siobhan and to Crystal and to the rest of you all. I appreciate you joining. So we're going to wait patiently for Julius to join in with us tonight. I'm trying to get my lighting right. You know, sometimes the sun gets in my eyes, so I'm going to move around a little bit so I could get the right in. Hey, Florence, I have one of my interns from the University of District of Columbia in, and she's going to be joining us. And we just had Julius from Still Smiling come in, so that's super exciting. So we can have a discussion around COVID-19, and all the implications that it's had for us in the mental health field, as well as had for us in our community. Oh, I see one of my best friends has joined. Hey, Janai. Again, I'm not sure what to do about this lighting. I guess we're just going to have a little sunshine in my eye and see what happens. I really look forward to you guys being able to ask us some questions tonight. We're about to go live with Smile, but ask some questions, put it in the chat. Make some comments just like Florence did, and let us know how it's going. Hey, Julius.
How you doing?
How are you?
I'm good, Dr. Plummer. How are you?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here. Glad that we're going to be able to work this out.
Yes, we got it. We got it figured out. No Teddy Riley moment.
No Teddy Riley. Bless his heart, though, because if he needs a little support after this, Onyx is here, and it's still
right.
there. You know, they might have embarrassed him, hurt his feelings a little bit.
We're here to catch you when you fall.
Exactly.
How you doing today?
I'm good. I'm excited. I had a good day today. Saw a couple clients, did some work for the university and everything. I was just telling everybody before you joined in that the sun decided to shine brightly now. So here it is in my face. I'm trying to adjust. But I'm having a good day. How about you?
Good. No worries. Get some vitamin D. You know, nothing wrong with that. Let it shine in. Yeah, I'm well. I had therapy. I had a teletherapy session earlier today, and I'm working through some major internal stuff right now. So I feel good.
Listen, I have my session every Friday morning at 10 o'clock. You're a therapist. You need therapy. Well, because we all need therapy, right? Uh-oh, are we getting connected here?
We're good now.
Okay. I hope it, Chanel told me to make sure I connected to the Wi-Fi. I hope it works out.
Okay, I can see you. We're good. Can you see me?
I can see you. I can see you.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you well.
All right. So I know we started with you hosting through Onyx. I just wanted to ask and see, are you okay with me kind of interviewing you? Because I got some questions.
Okay, questions.
I think, you know, we can be organic, but these are just sort of to help guide me and make sure I don't just go off into outer space on a tangent. Okay?
No problem. Yes, I'm absolutely 100% okay with you leading. I'm here to support whatever you need from me.
Thank you. Thank you. So everybody out there, thank you for joining us. I see more people are joining in. So tell a friend to join us. I'm Julius. I'm with Still Smiling. And our mission is really simple. It's to bridge the gap between Black people and mental health support through education, advocacy, and awareness. So we've had the pleasure and privilege and honor of working with Onyx Therapy Group and Chanel and Dr. Plummer and their team, and they've just been phenomenal in terms of helping us do the work at a community level in our neighborhoods, and also now talking about different opportunities with training and telemental health therapy and just making sure people heal and get the support that they need. So right now, as Dr. Plummer mentioned earlier, in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic, everybody needs some support. Everyone's in need of some nurturing and advice and tips and tools, and just to have the conversation. So we're glad that you all are here. Again, invite some friends to join us. But without further ado, I want to get right into it, if that's okay with you.
It's perfect. I'm ready.
Yeah. So as a Black woman, what inspired you to get into the mental health field?
I wish I had some like wonderful, beautiful story, right? But the reality is, I come from Los Angeles, California. I grew up in the 80s, and we had a lot of mental health issues in our community. We had people suffering with substance abuse issues. We had people suffering with what I now know to be delusional thoughts and schizophrenia, and then depression and anxiety. But of course, we didn't call it that in the 80s, right? And we certainly didn't call it that in our Black communities. And I was always, especially as a little kid, always intrigued by how people made certain decisions, like what motivated them to make certain decisions in their lives and with their experiences. And so when I went to Howard, I was actually thinking that I was going to study justice. I wanted to be a forensic psychologist, and at some point I wanted to be a family lawyer because all of that mattered to me. But then later, while I was in my work study program at Howard, I met a little guy, a little Black boy, and he was amazing. And he talked about his counselor, and it just really got me more involved and interested in mental health. And so subsequently, I graduated with my undergraduate degree and then went right into my master's program studying counseling and such. The benefit of going to Howard for my graduate program is that not only did I get to study the traditional elements of counseling and theory, we also studied it through the Afrocentric lens. So while we were studying Freud and Erickson and Rogers, we were also studying the theorists that originally came out of the continent of Africa, the theorists that were coming from South America that had Afrocentric lenses and things like that as well. And so that really motivated me to stay focused on my community as a Black woman and to be a healer in my community. So it started with my community, my neighborhoods. It started there, and that's where it continues. That's where the work continues to be.
I love it. And you're talking about some things related to cultural sensitivity, cultural humility, and the importance of that in the work. Can you share your thoughts on that?
Specifically around Black culture or around?
Yeah, and you know, how you and your practice, how you guys integrate it into your work, and why it's important to have that lens and to be able to acknowledge that for people when they come into a therapeutic setting.
Right. Absolutely. Well, one of the major things is I want my counselors to be completely authentic in all settings. So our graduate programs spend a lot of time telling us to be objective and to not, although we work on rapport, they tell us to separate ourselves a little bit from the experience. But as Black people, we find that our healing works best when we have a strong relationship with our healer, right? Like when we understand our healer, when we understand them on a personal level, when we understand them on a cultural level and on a spiritual level. So I spend a lot of time with my counselors talking about the importance of their identity and showing up authentically in the sessions, right? Showing up with who they are and what is important to them, what their values are, having conversations that are fun and funny that are related to culture, but also embracing spirituality, embracing cultural nuances, embracing the kind of language that we use. Again, we don't say things like somebody had a panic attack, right? We say, you know, they had a nervous breakdown. We don't say somebody has depression. We said that, you know, they locked themselves in their room and they got the blues or something like that, right? And so embracing that kind of language, embracing those kind of experiences and showing up authentically. My counselors know that I expect them to be their best selves in their sessions, and not just to rely on theory and research, but also to rely on intuition, because there's a reason why we get to be in that space with that client at that time. There's a reason why they chose us, and subsequently we chose them, whether we call that spiritual connection or whatever the case may be. We were guided to each other, and so we have to show up with each other.
Sure. And Chanel, one of your colleagues, mentioned that to me, that you are in fact a trained licensed professional, but you're also a spiritual being as well. Can you talk a little bit about how you guys integrate spirituality into the therapeutic model that you use?
Yeah, absolutely. In the very beginning, it happens through our intake process, right? So one of the very first questions that we ask, aside from like name and date of birth and the general demographics, is, do they have a religious or a spiritual background? And we make the separation between the two because religion is very much a structured way of getting access to what we consider our gods, right? And so whether it's through tradition or whether it's through processes, it's very structured. But then we also ask about spirituality, like how do they connect with the source, right? And we ask that from the very beginning, because generally we find that religion and spirituality can be a coping mechanism, but it can also be one of the things that that causes mental illness. It could be one of the issues that we have a separation with spirit, and subsequently we have a separation of self. If we think about what our research tells us, we understand that there's the connection between mind, body, and spirit. And if any of those elements are thrown off, we're going to have some issues, right? And in our Black communities and our brown communities, that means more, because many of us have been raised with a religious background, but not necessarily a spiritual background. And the difference again is that the religion is the format, right? It's the structure, but it doesn't necessarily align with spirituality, which is the connection to the source. So in a session that I had today, one of my clients was talking about an issue that she was having, but what keeps showing up in her dreams is an image of her grandfather. So that's who has passed, who is now one of her guiding ancestors. So I encouraged her to do a prayer to him specifically, like pray to that ancestor and ask him, what is he trying to show you in this moment? What is the question that he's trying to show you? And because our clients are open to those spiritual conversations, it makes it a lot easier for us to ask those spiritual conversations. And then they come back and they give us the answers. And generally, when they tap into that spiritual source, they get support that they need. I too am a little bit unorthodox in that way, because I tap into my spiritual sources before my sessions. I pray to my guides and my ancestors, and I pray that my clients' guides and ancestors show up in those sessions as well, because I am here as a vessel to be used by our gods, our universe, in the healing process. So my theory and my experience, my research, all that matters, but ultimately what matters most is my connection with my clients to be able to give them what they need at that time.
Of course.
And I encourage the same for my counselors. All of them don't use the same spiritual practices that I do, but I encourage them to be connected to source when they go into their sessions as well, because our work is not to be seen. Physical doctors, they see physical elements, but for us in therapy, the work that we do is unseen. And so we need additional support. We need additional lens. And sometimes that doesn't come from our naked eye, right? That comes from our intuition and other sources that are at our play.
I love it. And you have me thinking about right now, right in the middle of this pandemic, folks are still going to church. They're going to get the support, the healing that they want and they feel like they need in this particular time. And there's a lot of differing opinions. It's like, well, worship at home, do it online. Don't put your physical body or anybody else in a place of danger. So it just has me thinking about what people do to get their healing and how they go about doing it. And also, just how that's connected to healing and therapy right now in the time of COVID-19.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder if we sometimes people put themselves at harm because of tradition, right? They put themselves in this situation because they think that that's what they're supposed to do. But if religion is the structure that gets us connected to the source, then we should be able to connect to the source independently, because we are of the source. We don't necessarily have to go into the temple to connect to our God if our God is what made us, right? And so we should be able to connect with ourselves. And of course, there's all sorts of different modalities. We could do we could do Zoom or technology to connect with our messenger, who is our preachers and our pastors. But we don't necessarily need to put ourselves at physical risk. I'm not sure that, from my perspective, I'm not sure that that's what our God intended for us, to put ourselves at risk in order to worship. When I'm not a Bible person as much as I used to, but as I understand the Bible, it says when 2 or 3 are gathered together, right? Like, you don't necessarily need the whole congregation there. You just need that connection so that you can connect to your source, right? So I think we can do that in different ways, and we can do that through prayer. We can do that through meditation. We could do that through reading our Bibles, our spiritual books. We can do that in just being silent, because many times our message can come through our silence. In our society, we move so fast. We're a society that's used to getting content all the time and being able to have access all the time. And we've lost the art of quiet. We've lost the art of silence, and subsequently we're looking for somebody else to give us information when that information might very well be within us already.
2 books that you should write: The Art of Quiet and The Art of Silence. Are those already books that exist?
Let me write that down real quick. What you say now, because Julius, we might have to go into this together. The Art of Quiet, and what else did you say? I said
The Art of Silence. I mean, so profound and so simple, but still so profound. So I'm also thinking about how mental health is incorporated into the church, and specifically within the Black community. I know here in Pittsburgh, we've had a lot of pastors that reach out and they say, hey, we know we need mental health support. There have been some pastors locally who have unfortunately died by suicide, and they're carrying a lot of weight, and the weight of the congregation, the weight of feeling like they need to fix and heal everything. And I don't think Pittsburgh has quite figured it out, how to integrate mental health care supports into the church. I'm wondering if you had some advice or insight into that space.
I think what sometimes get lost because of our theories and research is that ultimately counselors are healers, right? And if we go into the more traditional piece, I remember having a conversation with Chanel when she was one of my interns, and we would have dialogue around religion and spirituality and the incorporation of religion, and the incorporation of mental health, rather. And we talked about Joseph from the Bible, right? The one with the brothers and the coat, and how, in my mind, he was one of the first counselors, right? He participated in psychoanalysis and dream analysis, right? He also did some predictions as such, and he gave advice and guidance to the Pharaoh at the time. But we don't call him a counselor because that's not what the language was at the time. I think right now what's happening is that our churches and our buildings around religion are not necessarily incorporating the fact that therapists are healers. We heal what is unseen. And again, if we think about the mind, the body, and the spirit as a triangle, as a trifold, we have physical doctors, medical doctors that heal the physical piece, and maybe we have pastors and preachers that heal the spiritual piece, but we as therapists are the ones that heal the mental piece, and we need to be incorporated in that way. People just don't know exactly where to place us, right? Because our training isn't medical, nor is our training in theology. Our training is in the mind and the psyche. There's also other issues that put at place, right? Like, how do you bill, and what does insurance look like, and all of those kind of conversations take away from the healing element of it, right? But ultimately, as therapists, as good quality therapists, and there's a difference between a therapist and a quality therapist, right? I want to make that clear. But a good quality therapist is a healer and should be embraced in all settings, just like a physical doctor is. No church denies a physical doctor, right? No church will say, oh, you're having extreme heart palpitations, let's just pray over that. Instead, they may say, go see your physician, right? When we have issues related to depression and anxiety and attachment disorder is huge in our Black communities as well, because of the way we have been raised culturally. We sometimes as parents disconnect from our children, but when we have those issues, we forget to say, go see your therapist, right? We think we could just pray it away. But did God not bring us to the church? Did God not bring therapists to the church? Did he not choose for people like me and you to be in this work, to be purpose driven, and to align with what, to be vessels used by him also? So if you have a medical doctor who's used for purpose, and you also have a therapist who's used for purpose, and you have a preacher who's used for purpose as well.
I love it. And there, on the flip side of that, right, there are people who are still going out, they're congregating, they're living their lives. They're like, you know what, I'm seeing the news, I'm seeing the death toll and all these major things that are happening, but I'm not going to let it stop me from doing what I do. I want to go to the salon, I want to go to the barber shop, I want to go here, wherever, the barbecue, whatever it is, I'm going because it's nice outside and I've been cooped up in the house for the winter, right? So there are a lot of people who are criticizing those people, and there are a lot of people who are like, you know what, if you go out, like it's becoming like a polarizing thing, right? It's like you're either on this side of the COVID conversation or you're on that side, and there doesn't really seem to be any at least from my perspective, maybe I'm overlooking it or missing it, there doesn't really seem to be any like, well, you can do what you want to do and I'll do what I want to do. And it seems like it's increasing tension and anxieties, specifically for Black and brown people because of all the things, pre-existing conditions, socioeconomic stuff, all those things. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on how we can have those conversations in a productive way instead of like attacking each other. And what's at the root of?
I think the other element that we have to consider for Black and brown communities, I'm going to get back to that question, and if I forget, then just remind me. But
Sure.
The other thing is that you know, there's been so much research around cellular generational trauma, right? The original research was around Holocaust victims and subsequently what they were experiencing during the Holocaust and what they passed down to their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren in a cellular manner, right? From the cells, biologically, right?
Okay.
And the same is true for those of us who are descendants of slaves. We have cellular trauma that plays a role in different aspects of our lives. And then in addition to that, we have environmental elements of trauma. And I say all of that to say that we as Black people don't want to be told what we cannot do, because our ancestors for so many generations were told what they cannot do, right? And so subsequently, telling us to stay in one place feels like some sort of incarceration, right? And so there's this compelling desire to go against that. In addition to that, there's also our mistrust around medical doctors and facilities. I mean, we are descendants of the generations that dealt with Tuskegee, right? And where the experiments were done on us. And then politically, we don't trust our political advisors because they have not focused on us. We were not the central focus. So sometimes I think that as people, culturally, we don't take into consideration what's being said because we don't think it applies to us because we were never part of the original consideration, right? And so we say that doesn't apply to me, that has to do with you. And of course, there's the economic issues that are at play related to who are the essential workers, and it's usually Black and brown people. That's a whole nother conversation, right, Julius, about how we even became
essential workers, right? We've always been essential workers in this country, and I'm about tired of being essential workers at some point, right? We keep building and building. But I think those factors have to be considered as well. The generational trauma that's been given to us cellularly and also environmentally, in addition to our mistrust around the healthcare system and politics as well. So I needed to add that in before I got deep into your question. So can you remind me of the question just real quickly, and I could get into it?
Yeah. Just how it's becoming polarizing. So people are saying, well, if you're going out, if you're going to live your life like nothing is happening, then you're stupid, you're wrong, you shouldn't be doing that. You need to be staying inside. And it's creating a lot, heightened anxiety and disagreements, and more people are on edge where you want, and it could just be a situation where a son wants to see his mom. Exactly. Or, a loved one wants to see somebody else who they love, like the power of human connectivity. So it's not just the thing that you see, oh, you're leaving the house, you're being disrespectful, haven't you been watching the news? It's like, yes, I miss my mom. Yeah. I miss my friend, so I think there's just more to that we're still unpacking in real time.
It's so much more to that, right? I was just, I had to do some additional research on it earlier in the process because I couldn't figure out why we were not responding well to this concept of video sessions and technology and video happy hours and things like that. And in the research that I did, I realized a bit more about how our minds are being tricked in these moments, right? And it's not, well, there's so much. One of the videos I wanted to do for you guys was around what's happening in our brains during this time. But one of the things that came out from that is that our body is used to us responding when we have interpersonal interactions. It's more than the senses of seeing and hearing a person or even touching a person. It's the chemical exchange that comes through interaction. It's what we call like pheromones, what we call energy, what we call aura. All of that is part of an exchange of experience that we have when we're by people, when we're next to people. And for some people, that's what really motivates and leads their life, if you will, right? And so right now, because we don't get to have because we're stuck into our homes, there's a huge part of us that's missing, right? Particularly because we were born of a person and we are used to being of people, but right now we're in these quarantines, so we don't get those interactions. So part of our being is missing during these quarantines. And so people are not just going out into public because they want to be risky. Some of them are going out because there's this subconscious and unconscious need to connect with other people because they're feeling the chemical deficits. It's not just the emotional deficit, it's the chemical deficits of connecting with others. It's also why things like isolation in prison don't work, why people don't make it, and it's because we need the chemical exchange of other people, and quarantine doesn't allow that to always happen. We may get that in our homes, depending on some of us that may live with other people, like our spouses and our children and things like that, but that's not the case for everybody. And just because you live in a house with a spouse and children don't necessarily mean that you're getting it from them, right? Shout out to my wife. I think she's watching right now, and also, and my children are on too. But sometimes people are living in homes where they're not physically connecting with the people that are with them. They're not doing the hugs. They're not doing the kisses. That's not how they were raised, or that's not what they're comfortable doing. And so people are subsequently willing to risk it all to get what they need. It's not a want. It's not like, I just want to be out in public. You may want to go to happy hour. You may want to go to brunch, but you need that physical connection to somebody. And we need to figure out what this looks like over the next few weeks or months or however, because people are not making it. They're not making it.
Yeah, and I'm hearing a lot from parents and caregivers that are experiencing this challenge with their young people about saying they won't listen. I keep trying to tell them, you're going to go out, you may be asymptomatic, you may run into somebody who's asymptomatic, and then you bring it back into the house. Now you risk getting me sick, you risk getting your aunt sick, you risk getting grandma sick. And I've heard so many adults say they're just not listening. The young people are just not listening to me. So do you have any recommendations or tips for parents or caregivers on how they're communicating with our young people in this time, knowing that the young people are like, they're trying to get that energy. They're not just trying to go ride their bike or whatever, that their body is missing that energy.
Yeah. With kids and our adolescents, it's so much more, right? Like as adults, we get caught up in what we're experiencing in the moments, like what we're missing, but our children are experiencing grief too. Grief isn't just about physical loss of a human life. It's also about loss in general. That's what grief is. And they are missing so much. They're missing their teachers. They're missing their friends. They're missing the structures and routines. They're missing even things that we thought were annoying to them, like homework. It's part of their routine. And we know that we as people do well with structure. And so they're missing their structure as we're trying to figure it out. The other element with children and adolescents is that we know through the World Health Organization that adolescents, the ages of adolescence has now changed from it is now between the ages of 10 years old and 24 years old, which means that the frontal cortex of our brain isn't fully developed until 24. We used to be told that it was 18, but we know that's not. Anybody who was 18 knows that your brain is not fully developed at 18, right? And then we were told it was 21, and then that's when we became okay with the drinking age being 21 because the alcohol wouldn't affect the development of the brain. But actually what we're experiencing now is that it's what our research is telling us now is that it's actually at age 24. And with the underdevelopment of the frontal cortex, it means that people are not able to communicate in the best ways. So the communication process, the articulation, the formation of thoughts and words, the expression and all of that is not fully developed until 24. And that's for the best case scenario. As we talk about it with children and adolescents, going outside and playing is a form of communication. It's how they communicate with themselves. It's how they communicate with each other. It's how they build up their sense of security, right? Like, can I do this? Oh, I could climb these monkey bars. I'm strong. That's how they build their sense of security. Oh, can I play with this person? And can we figure out who's going to go first versus who goes second? That's problem solving. That's interpersonal skills, right? When we talk about riding bikes, we're talking also about their physical development, right? And so when we take away play, we're also taking away their voice. We're silencing them. And so, and most play occurs outside, especially in our Black communities, right? Because you can't sit on certain parts of your couch. You can't eat in certain parts of your room. It's certain things we can't do in a Black house, right? And so going outside is where freedom is. That's liberation. And so the kids are not just going outside. For us as adults, we go outside because we need that chemical exchange, right? That those connections to pheromones and things like that. But with children, it's not just that. It's their communication. It's their ability to talk with themselves and to talk with other people in ways that make sense. And it's not verbal. It's in what they do. So when our kids are saying we want to go outside and we need to do something, we need to find ways to make that work, right? The other thing, my counselors are on the chat giving me some reminders. They're saying, hey, Dr. Plummer, don't forget that we're also silencing their feelings, because when we tell them no in those situations, we're also not taking the time to explore that they feel lonely and they feel alone. Our children are experiencing something unique right now because they're used to us being parents that are at home and available to them, they're not used to seeing mommy work mode or daddy work mode. And I don't know about you, Julius, but I could be a different person at work, right? As a CEO of a company, I get real headstrong about things. So my kids come in at 12 o'clock asking me a question, and I'm like, if it's not in the email, I don't know what to tell you, right? So they got to see me in a different kind of way, and they're making adjustments in those ways as well. So our kid, in my opinion, our kids are experiencing this quarantine and this change in a far more detrimental way than we are. We have 20 and 30 and 40 and 50 years of learning how to adapt, but our children are not necessarily equipped that way. So what do I say to parents when their children want to go outside and play? I said, we need to figure that out. We need to figure out a time of the day where they can go outside and they can do something. This may mean we go old school and we buy some jump ropes and we teach our kids how to double dutch. This may mean that we get some chalk and we draw on the sidewalk. This may mean we get some jacks and we teach them old school ways of playing jacks. It may mean if you like checkers or chess, then you do that. It may mean that if you liked coloring books when you were a kid, because I was a coloring book person. Shout out to He-Man and She-Ra coloring books. But you bring out your crayons and your color pencils, and you figure a way. The best thing to do is to try to be outside with them. One of my counselors just said, make sure you create a schedule. So make sure you go outside with them. The schedule is important for predictability pieces, but they need to be outside. So we cannot deny them being outside. Whether we let them go outside with a close relative with whom we know have been taking care of themselves and have been quarantined, maybe like aunties and uncles who also have kids at home and they spend 30 minutes together, then we figure it out. But we cannot deny our children the opportunity to go outside. Get them a mask, get them the gloves, clean them up before they leave the house, clean them up when they come in, have the wipes at the front door, have the Lysol or whatever we need at the front door. But we have to be able to let our kids get some playtime. One, because of the oxygen and the blood levels as it pertains to our brain, because our brains are working at double the amount of speed, but also because this is the way that they communicate with themselves and the world. This is where they learn their self-talk script is through play.
I love it. And I'm thinking about some of the caregivers and parents who are battling with addiction right now because of physical distancing and isolation. So what kind of insight or recommendations or just enlightenment would you want to share as it relates to that? And, connecting with young people as well.
Yeah. Addiction is so tough, right? Because at the time in which we are addicted, it usually becomes a physical dependency, right? And so there's physical intervention that needs to be at play, whether that's medication or just a change in some of those experiences. For those parents that are experiencing physical addiction, that's where we really need to connect with our therapists that are licensed in substance use disorder, right? That's where those therapists have much more skilled and evidence-based interventions around how to manage addictive thoughts and behaviors during these particular times. Addiction is something very real in my family too. I think we've had a history of addiction, particularly with alcohol, and again in the 80s in LA, some other drugs like cocaine and crack. Those were usually escape mechanisms, though, right? They were trying to escape something. It wasn't just the taste of whatever they were having or the environment. It was this idea of escaping. So even more than just the addictive piece, many people at this time can't escape, right? Like what we're finding in our practice is that many of our clients are talking to us about the fact that they are forced to face the things that they've been running away from. They are forced to face some of their old traumas. They are forced to face their decision-making processes and the implications as such. And sometimes it sounds funny, but it's not always. They're also forced to face who they decided to marry and who they decided to have children with, right? Because that support element is not always there at this particular moment, right? So this is a time where people are not just those who have addiction issues, but all people are being put in a position where they have to really think about what has been going on in their lives, and the decisions that they've made, the processes that have been made, the systems that have been made that puts them in the place that they are. As Black people, we also recognize that all of our life is not dependent on our decisions. Some of those circumstances far outweigh the decisions that we've been able to make, right? There's been systems in place that have determined our path to some degree as well. And we have to be honest and forthcoming with that, which is why we have so many counselors, especially at Onyx, and focus on teletherapy, because this is the time where more people need counseling because they're forced to deal with things and they need somebody to talk it out with. And sometimes our family members and our friends are not always the safest people to talk to.
Yeah, and we're seeing with our organization, a lot of people dealing with financial related strain and trauma. And with that, a lot of the safety net organizations that used to have the money to give out, their budgets are being exhausted. They're laying people off and furloughing people. So when you talk about having to really grapple with a lot of these things and come face to face with things that you may not have the power in that moment to change, can leave somebody just feeling helpless or hopeless. How do you and your counselors inspire those folks or give them something to hold on to in the midst of all of this?
For different clients, it looks differently, right? Like we talked about in the beginning of our time together, you and I, we talked about the spiritual element. So for some of them, we may talk about it spiritually, right? For some of us, we talk about it in terms of decision-making and processes. For some of us, we talk about it in terms of perseverance and determination. So depending on the client and their mindset, our relationship with them, et cetera, that is the determining factor on how we kind of engage in the conversation. Ultimately, from the existential theoretical orientation, I ask a lot about meaning. Like, what is your position? Why are you in this position at this time? I never ask a why question because that's a horrible therapeutic question, right? It leads to judgment. But I ask questions that are generally get into the thought in terms of what is your influence in this situation? What is your role? How can things be done differently if that's what you want? I told you I had clients earlier today. So with another one of my clients, we talked about the pandemic, and she mentioned a lot about the earth healing itself, right? Like we're seeing greens that we've never seen before, and purples that we've never seen before, and flowers that we've never paid attention to. And my question to her was, and if you are connected to the earth, then what parts of yourself are healing too? What parts of yourself are you supposed to be responsible for getting in touch with right now? And from there, it got her to thinking about some of the decisions that she's made in her life and how this is really the opportunity for her to address those and to heal for those. When our doctors tell us to rest, it's not just resting because we physically need the rest. It's because we need to slow down so our body can heal. Right now, this quarantine is causing us to slow down so that we can heal emotionally, right? And when we think about it like that, it tends to be a little bit more empowering. We don't know when this is going to end. You know, the doctors are saying some things, the politicians are saying other things, but we know this is an opportunity to try to focus on some of the things that we can. With that being said, I recognize that can be a privilege in itself, though. Everybody is not in a position to slow down. Everybody is not in a position to heal like that. Some people are very much in survival mode during these times. And again, that's when I would say to definitely reach out to those of us that are trained in this work as therapists, as healers, to help what that process looks like. You and I haven't talked much about the neurological science behind the brain and what's going on right now, but definitely recognizing that if we are in a position to slow down, then we should slow down, even though it goes against our socialization as Americans to move quickly and to accomplish a lot.
As you were talking, you made me think about reflect on this question that we ask our team members a lot and all of our partners, like who heals the healers? Because now we're as frontline workers, you know, and even with medical professionals, there's increased mental health challenges there. But just thinking about all of your team members and your colleagues that you have on this conversation, how are you guys supporting each other? And how are you encouraging self-help and mental health support? Because there is an added weight now on our shoulders as healers.
Yeah, from the medical lens, we at Onyx are supporting medical healers through our counseling groups. So we've developed a counseling group specifically for those who are working in the medical field, whether they're doctors or nurses, but also our janitorial staff, because they are in a position as well, right? They may not be working directly with the client, with the patients, but they're there and they need to process the fact that patients are passing away or coming in at these extreme rates and things like that. So we provide direct counseling for those folks as well. For ourselves as mental health folks, man, we are talking throughout the day. My counselors, first off, I've always encouraged all of my counselors to participate in their own therapy. I try to lead that as the CEO of the company. I go to therapy every Friday morning at 10 o'clock quite regularly. I need her and I love her, my therapist. But I try to model that for my team, and I encourage all of them to go to counseling themselves. The other element of that is that through clinical supervision, I use the discrimination model as well as my own model that I developed. And part of that allows for us to have that personal therapy experience within clinical supervision too. So they're getting therapy through their therapist, but then they're also getting some of that therapeutic support through the personalization piece from working with me. We also have group supervision. We also talk amongst each other. We have a group me where all of my counselors are on there and they chit chat and they like just build each other up. It increases the morale. We have an upcoming happy hour that we're doing where we can all just get together and kind of let our hair down, let our locks down, let our braids down, and talk about things that are happening with us that are important to us. But I also encourage them to do things like connecting with source every day. There's an app called Liberate, which is beautiful. It's designed for Black people and connection to ancestors, connection to some of our trauma that we've had in this particular country. So the meditation, we send them journaling prompts all the time so that they can journal around certain things. We do check-ins with each other. I have one of my friends, Ashley Stevens, on right now, who's part of my sister circle, and we check in with each other all the time. So she's not a counselor, but having a network of people who you can trust with your secrets, who you can trust with your vulnerability, because we need that too. And as counselors, we don't say our clients' names, but sometimes we need to just talk about some of these experiences and release them off of our chest, right? Because we are the holder, the storage of many people's secrets. And sometimes that storage gets too heavy for us. And so we need to be able to just release it through journaling, through talking, through prayer, through meditation. Also releasing it physically through energy. So going out for runs or walks or bike rides or skating or whatever we can do to release it physically as well. Singing is also helpful because although you're not necessarily singing the words of the experience that you had, your mind is connecting to the words and it's also releasing through that way. So the song may be about something else, but you're thinking about something you just experienced. So that also is a great way of release.
Absolutely. And as you were talking, you made me think about, school teachers, just everyday people who aren't necessarily trained or licensed mental health professionals. And we hear it a lot with folks that come to our events and do our trainings. They're like, I don't have time to do all this stuff. Because what you just said, I'm like, man, I wonder how you sustain that, because all those things are so amazing. And I think one of the barriers that we run into organizationally is like having the processes in place, to be able to sustain these things, right? Because it's one thing to motivate the people and inspire them to want to do it, but what are the processes and the checks and balances to ensure that we get reminders and we have, tools to guide us? So I'm giving that context because post-COVID, whenever post-COVID happened, I feel like that kind of stuff that you're saying, it needs to be happening in schools. It needs to be happening in congregations. It needs to be happening in sports teams. It needs to be like sprinkled in to every part of the universe.
Yeah.
And how do we do that?
Yeah. The sustainability piece comes with reminders from different sources, right? Like we are a company that is about 25, 30 people strong. And so if I forget certain things, they remind me that it's time to do it. And so for me as the CEO, being open to hearing from my staff and saying, hey, Doc, it's time for us to do such and such, or hey, I'm tired around such and such, becomes a reminder to me. So first thing is the leader has to be open, right? Like I'm not going to have all the answers. And even though we're talking about mental health, I don't have all the answers. I rely on my team. We are a unit, right? Like we are a plane, a vessel that work together. I may sit at the front, but they are the ones that are the power behind a lot of this, right? And so being able to listen to them when they say it's time for us to do some check-ins. It's time for us to try something different. That's extremely important. For our schools and different organizations, it's the same approach. We just recently we're in the middle of doing some work with a company called the National Charter Collaborative, and they're setting aside time in the evenings for their education leaders to participate in therapy with us. It's that we have to make the time. The time doesn't happen every day, Julius. Everything that I just described, we're not skating and running and doing push-ups and reading and journaling every day. No, that our life isn't designed that way, so we can't do it that way. But we must make time to do these things. We must feel the priority and the importance. And as we talk again about Black and Brown communities, we haven't been socialized to make our mental health and our emotional health a priority. I was talking to some leaders the other day, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that we've been socialized to just push, and not pay attention to anything else. But these conversations that we're having, you and I, and people with counselors and things like that, all of that is really the reminder to take care of self. In terms of the schools, you should see my chief development officer. I'm not sure if he's on here, Mighty Fine. He keeps us in schools. He keeps us in organizations. He's like, hey, Doc, this person needs you. Hey, Doc, this organization needs it. And we have somebody specifically dedicated to making sure that that our community is getting the things that we need and that we can provide at that time. So it takes a team, right? Like, I'm here talking to you tonight. This is my honor to be here with you, but it's really my team that makes it happen. It's my team that makes sure that we stay connected to what's happening in the communities. We're about to start doing some work with returning citizens that have just been released from incarceration. It's my team that motivated me on that. Like, hey, Doc, this is what's happening in these particular areas. And I have personal experiences with those who've been incarcerated as well. But they are the ones who are like, this is where we need some of the help. And what is Onyx about to do? And so for our schools, making sure that they have somebody on staff or somebody who's conscious about mental health, that they're advocating, that they're actually courageous enough to say our staff members need support, our students need support. A lot of it is based off of that courage. It's based off of the access and things like that. And the same with our government workers, our agencies, our private practices, because our counselors need counseling as well. So just staying focused and making sure that that team is connected to us so that we can make it happen.
Definitely. I know we're winding down here. I know
what?
Instagram
Already, Julius, it's already time?
Not yet. Almost. Instagram, they'll kick us off at an hour. So I just don't want to I want to have a nice wrap up.
Okay.
You might start getting some kind of like notification on your screen at some point.
Okay.
What are you learning about yourself in this process?
Wow. Okay. I'm learning how connected I am to routine, and that has served me well on my path to success, but it's no longer serving me well. That I have to be more flexible, and that's hard for me. I think I talked a little bit about the beginning, coming up from poverty and in really difficult situations. So structure is what kind of got me out of those situations. And now I don't get to have the same level of structure. So that realization with myself has been hard. It's been challenging. It sounds simple, like, girl, just go with the flow, right? But if that wasn't, that's not my level of comfort. And so I have to go against and learn something new. I learned that I absolutely 100% love and adore my children, but sometimes I don't want to talk to them. They are the greatest human beings. They have such insight, and sometimes I am dead tired and I cannot engage in the conversation with them. I've learned that to rest. I'm not a person that rests well. I don't rest well. I'm always being told to sit down and to have a moment, but there's so much that needs to happen in our community, so much with mental health, so much with healing. I'm also a faculty member at Johns Hopkins University. So we're at the end of the semester, and there's so much that has to be done to prepare counselors for the world, to prepare clients in what they need, to prepare my children to be available for my wife. And I'm not always resting, and my body keeps forcing me to rest. And so I'm learning to rest, and that's hard for me. I feel super vulnerable saying that because it feels like I should just relax, but I don't. I always stay connected to my source, but I pray throughout the day. I pray in the morning, but now I'm praying a whole lot more. I'm burning my Palo Santo. I'm burning my sage. I'm playing my music and all sorts of things because I need that for myself. I'm learning a lot about the research around the neuroscience of our brain, primarily because I need to be able to give information to my counselors and my clients, but I also need to give that information to myself. I need to understand why I'm so sluggish. I need to understand why I get headaches a little bit more. And it's a neuroscience behind it. It's not the emotional piece. It's not just the physical piece. It's a chemical piece behind what's going on in our brains. I see we have 2 minutes left. So I'm learning about that. The other stuff I already do, right? I'm vulnerable, I'm open, I laugh a lot, I read, I journal. I think my biggest lessons are it's okay to not want to talk to everybody in my house. It's okay to just be quiet. It's okay to just want to rest and to sleep in. It's okay to reschedule something because my body told me to sit down.
Dr. Plummer, we thank God for you. We thank the universe for you. We thank the spirits for you. We are grateful for you. I'm grateful for you. You make me want to go pick up 10 books and read them and learn some more stuff. And the way that there are only a few clinicians that I've met that have that special balance between the clinical and the people piece. Yeah. You truly have a gift. So please continue to shine your light and just pour into yourself and into other people. So thank you.
Thank you. And have me back, right? I love this interview with you. There's such awesome questions. Of course, we've always been committed to working with you at Still Smiling. and the beautiful work that you're doing there in Pittsburgh. So let's do this some more, right? It's not like I'm going anywhere. So.
Yeah, part two. Part two, we got witnesses. Part two.
All right, part two, I'm here for it.
Thank you, Dr. Plummer.
All
Have a
right.
good night.
Good night. Good night.
See y'all.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Bye.